Every time we order a bunch more, whoever comes to this just brings like a suitcase full of this because they don't ship it. So I almost like order. Yeah, I know. Put it in the Ziploc bag, a bunch more
efficient, like contraband.
Yeah, exactly. Looking forward to getting ready now.
Oh yeah, yes, I know, right? When I helped them move yesterday some stuff. Yeah, so I took three trailer loads and truckloads, just boxes and stuff for them. Yeah. Yeah. And a utility trailer too, so we can load that.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome back, or welcome to week 2 after our launch. Invite you, if you're able to, please feel free to stand up and worship with us this evening.
Turning to you.
fears are washed away, washed away. Come to know you more, Lord. Pray that you would just continue to win our hearts to you, Lord. Nothing can separate. Nothing can separate. Even if I ran away, 'cause your love never fades. And I know I still make mistakes, but you have your mercies for me every day. Your love never fades. You say the same through the ages. Your love never changes. There may be pain in the night, joy comes in the morning. And when the oceans rage, I don't have to be afraid, because I know that you love me. Your love never fades. When the strong and the water's deep, I'm not alone here in these open seas. Your love never fails. When the chasm is far too wide, I never thought I'd reach the other side. Your love never fails. You say the same through the ages. Your love never changes. There may be pain in the night, joy comes in the morning. And when the oceans rage, I don't have to be afraid, because I know that you love me. Your love never fades. Your love never fades. You make all things work together for my good. You make all things work together for my good. You make all things work together for my good. You make all things work together for my good. You say the same. You say the same through the ages.
can just fully trust you with whatever problems it is that we have in our lives, Lord. Thank you for that promise in your word, Lord, that you work all things for our good, Lord. The good of those who are called according to your will and your purpose, Lord.
Worth more, I'll never come close. Nothing can compare. You're our living hope. Your presence, Lord. I've tasted and seen of the sweetest of loves, when my heart becomes free and my shame is undone. Your presence, Lord. Holy Spirit, you are welcome here. Come flood this place and fill the atmosphere. Your glory, God, is what our hearts long for. To be overcome by your presence, Lord. Your presence,
There's nothing worth more.
There's nothing worth more that will ever come close. Nothing can compare. You're our living hope. Your presence, I've tasted and seen of the sweetest of loves, where my heart becomes free and my shame is undone. Your presence, Lord. Holy Spirit, you are welcome here. Come flood this place and fill the atmosphere. Your glory, God, is what our hearts long for. To be overcome by your presence, Lord. Let us become more aware of your presence. Let us experience the glory of your goodness. Let us become more aware of your presence. Let us experience the glory of your Spirit, you are welcome here. Come flood this place and fill the atmosphere. Your glory, God, is what our hearts long for. To be overcome by your presence, will
the darkness. You're restoring every heart that's been broken, Lord. Thank you for that, Lord. Thank you for the hope. Thank you for the love that we have in you. Thank you that you don't just leave us where we are. You don't leave us broken, Lord. Those things in our lives that have been broken, the ways that our hearts have been hurt, you're restoring that, Lord. You're using it for our good and for your glory, Lord. Thank you for that. In Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. You can take a seat.
Welcome to Canvas Church, and so glad that each of you are here. I want you to know that you've been prayed for this week. Maybe not all by name, because we didn't know exactly who would be here, but know that you were prayed for. God knew that you would be here this Sunday. I believe that each one of us is here not by accident. And so that's exciting to me, to know that God has an intentional purpose and a plan, and that sometimes when life seems like it's all out of control, I'm glad to know that there's somebody more powerful than me that is in control, and I can trust him. Man, I tell you what, I've got a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a 3-month-old. Sometimes our house seems completely out of control. I'm just like so glad that God can help us. We believe that God is at work in Oak Bay, drawing people to himself. And not just Oak Bay, but we believe that God is at work in Canada. And this past week, if you were here last week, we had our launch service Sunday night. I took the 6 o'clock flight the next morning to Toronto to join with other new pastors and people who are planting churches all across Canada. What an amazing thing to be in a room full of people with stories of saying, this is what God's doing in Toronto. This is what God's doing in Calgary. This is what God's doing in Edmonton. This is what God's doing in Vancouver. And to hear stories about people who are seeing this happen all over the country. Saying, we walked into town with nothing, just prayed. Said, God, we believe that you're at work. Would you draw people to yourself? And churches have been forming. And heard a pastor from Montreal who 5 years ago started a church in Montreal, and it absolutely exploded. Montreal is one of the least likely places to find an active church. Just the belief system that you find in Montreal is just in a lot of ways kind of what they would call post-Christian, sort of moved on from all of that. And yet, this church is, in the last 5 years, they've baptized 500 people. I mean, it's incredible, right? The church exploded. It's like running several thousand now. It's got 3 campuses, and just to hear stories of how they're saying, it's not us, right? We prayed and we said, God, you do a miracle of what only you can do. And they're seeing young people and creative people, and just an amazing thing happening all across the country. We believe that God is at work in Victoria and in Oak Bay. And so excited to be a part of that. Canvas is about helping people discover their place in the story, the family, and the mission of God. The story, we're part of a bigger story, right? God's been doing something long before we came on the scene, and we're part of a bigger picture. It's not just us. We've become part of something much bigger, and we're part of that family, right? A church as this family together. And I don't know how you've come tonight. If you would say, man, I'm doing great. My faith is stronger than it's ever been, and I'm growing, and this is amazing. You might say, I don't know that I believe all that stuff yet. You know, I'm reading through the Bible, and I've got questions, and I'm not on board with all of that yet, but I'm seeking to know what's true. And I want to know if this is true or not. Or you might say, man, I used to feel like my faith was real strong, and now I've kind of gone through a rough patch. And I'm trying to figure out where I am now. And wherever you are on that spectrum, I'm going to say that you are welcome here, and we're so glad that you're here. And again, I believe that you are not here by accident. And so I hope and pray that something tonight is encouraging and helpful to you on your journey, wherever you are on that journey. I'm going to steal a story from my father tonight. my dad is one of the best preachers that I know. Hopefully he'll be here in June, and if he's here over a Sunday, I'll get him to fill this spot because just one of the best communicators that I know. But he's got a great story that I was part of when I was a kind of a young kid at the time. And he was a pastor of a church, and then he took a job to be the president of a school. And so he went from being able to preach every single Sunday to doing a lot of administrative stuff, and he kind of missed it. He missed being able to preach all the time, and so not long after he took this job, he was given an opportunity to come to a local retirement center, and he said, "We have a chapel, would you come and preach at our chapel?" Now, he'd been out of practice for a little while, and so he was like, he had all these sermons sort of built up in his head and in his heart, and he was just like, I'm going to lay it out there for him. Like, I'm going to cram 10 sermons into one, and it's going to be like the best sermon that has ever been preached on earth. You know, like he was just like, had all this stuff, and so he's, family, if you would like to come with me, you're welcome to come, but just know, like, Daddy's on a mission. Right, like Dad, don't want you to get in the way. Like Daddy's got to go. He's gonna preach. He's gonna do his work there, and you guys are welcome to come along. But I don't want you to get in the way. And if it's I want to talk to people afterwards, and I don't want you tugging on my shirt. Like, is it time to go? And so as long as you guys are okay with that, you're welcome to come. And so we were young at the time. I think I was about 10. My brother was 8, and my little sister was about 5. And so I was like, yes, you won't even know we're there. We'll come in and but we want to go. We used to go to church with Daddy preaching all the time, and we miss that, so we want to come with you. So sure enough, we show up at this place, great retirement center, go in there, and my dad gets up to preach, and he's just sort of laying it all out there, like the best sermon to ever have been preached. And then all of a sudden, he realizes something. Nobody in the room is paying attention to him. And he was like, at first I thought maybe I was in some sort of place where people with neck injuries, because they were all like this. And he follows over to see what they're all looking at, and he realizes they're all looking at us. And we had slipped in, as we were told, and we were just sort of sitting in the back corner, trying to blend in with the scenery. But every single person in that room was more interested in all these cute kids than they were the preacher. And so my dad's trying to think, like, what do I do? Like, nobody wants to listen to me. And so he kind of gets through his sermon and gets near the end, and he's closing. And in closing, he's sort of mercifully bringing it to an end and says, and, be glad to talk to you. If any of you have any issues you want to talk about, I'm here for counseling, and, I am a professional and all this stuff. And sort of as a throw in, and if some of you would like to talk to my wife and kids. They're here too. He said it was like a stampede. All of a sudden, the whole room ends up over where we are, and they're like, they're playing with little sister, and they're making faces. And actually, during the actual service, while he's preaching, he was like, there was men like having gunfights with my sons behind the seats and stuff, playing like games with them and making faces, and they're slipping them candy, and all they needed was permission to go talk to the kids, and so they're all over there, and my dad says, like, and nobody came to talk to me. He's like, oh, just kind of hanging out, and so eventually makes his way over to my mom and stands by her and says, I'm ready to go now. And my mom says, well, we've just got a policy that, we're here to talk to everybody until the last person, and so, go entertain yourself. And so he's sitting there trying, twiddling his thumbs, and then he looks down the hallway, and to his absolute shock and horror, he sees me, his oldest son, sitting in the basket of a woman's walker. And she is pushing me down the hallway. And he goes, Mike! Like, what are you doing? This is my I'm just all arms and legs hanging out of this thing. And I look at him like, sorry. And he's like, Mike, get out of that woman's basket right now. And she looks back and says, oh, no, it's okay. I told him to get in the basket. I'm giving him a ride. And I'm like looking at my dad like, what can I say, Dad? The woman told me to get in the basket. And so she's walking me all the way down the hallway. And he's like, my dad's worried, like, this woman's going to be injured for the rest of her life. He's like, but okay, well, maybe just a little bit, and no, I'm going to take him all the way down to the end of the hall. And goes all the way to the end of the hall. Okay, Mike, that's enough. Like, get out of the basket. No, I got to bring him back. And so just taking an eternity, right, to get back down. And finally gets there. My dad grabs me and pulls me out of the basket, like, get out of that basket. This poor woman, I think it's time to go. And she says, well, I got to give a ride to the other two kids. Like, I can't just do the one. And so in hops my brother, and down they go. By the time my sister goes down the hallway and gets back, I mean, like, the lights are out, people are gone. It's essentially all but locked up. We're the last ones in the building. And we finally go out to our car, and we sit in there and turn on the car and just start driving home. And one of us, I don't remember which one of us just pipes up and asks my dad, Dad, why did those people do that? And my dad just thinks for a moment. He says, son, tonight, people needed joy. And all I had was a sermon. You guys gave them joy. And it's interesting because have you ever felt like maybe you weren't being noticed? It's a humbling moment when you feel like you're not noticed, you're not given enough attention, you're not given enough spotlight. Maybe everybody's looking somewhere else, and maybe sometimes even our attempts to help others are just veiled attempts for affirmation for ourselves. And we say, I'm giving to others, but really we're broken inside, and we want affirmation for ourselves. We're often faced with two different ways to live in this world. We can approach it asking, what's in it for me? Or we can approach it asking, what can I give to them? What's in it for me? You can go through life that way, asking that question. Or go through life and say, what can I give? What can I give to that person? How can I make this person's life better? How can I bless this person? Our culture today mostly encourages us to invest in us, right? We're told to be the best versions of ourselves, to get more for ourselves. I mean, how many commercials or ads do you see that says, you know what? You've got everything you need. If you've got, a family, if you've got love, if you've got a friend, you've got everything you need. No, I mean, the whole industry of advertising is about telling you what you need that you don't have. Social media is an interesting thing in our world today because it allows us to present a version of our lives that is incomplete at best, but false at worst. And it's fascinating because it's kind of this, social media allows us to sort of reach out for that affirmation and say, I want a little bit of the spotlight. And I found this cartoon, I think this is hilarious. It says, you look different in your online profile. And he says, I was impressing you with my Photoshop skills. some guy showing up for a date doesn't look anything like his online profile. Why is that? Well, because on Facebook, it's our attempt to invest in ourselves, right? It's saying, I want to put the best me out there so I can get people to like my comments, I can get people to comment about how great of a person I am. It's just sort of this affirmation machine that says, I want people to tell me how great I am. Technology has sort of allowed us to turn our eyes inward. I love this one too. He's looking at his phone on a date. It says, do you mind if I strap your phone to my forehead so I can pretend you're looking at me when we talk? Have you seen that, right? People attached to their phone. I mean, that's me, right? I'm guilty of that. You're sitting around with other people. I remember one time having a group of young people at what we were doing in Georgia, our ministry in Georgia, in a coffee shop, and there was a table with 4 people. And all 4 of them, they're all friends. They know each other. It's not awkward like new people. These are friends. All 4 of them are down like this on their phone. I want to be like, sort of like, hey, like, you lift your head up a little bit. Like, there's a person who's a whole lot more interesting than what's on your phone. Like people are fascinating. They're interesting. They can like be your friend and love you and be there for you in ways that your phone or technology never could. And yet. In our world, it becomes very hard to turn our eyes away from ourselves because all these things are making us turn into ourselves. And there's a philosopher, Friedrich Nietzsche, you may have heard of him, had a pretty killer mustache back in the day. Paul, I want to see you do one of those. I bet you could and pull it off. If anyone could, it's you. He believed in something that he called the Superman. And basically he said, if you look around the world, if there's no God, if we're just sort of accidental, and if there's no God, then really it's a world where the strong survive. And he talked about the Superman. He said the ones who rule, the ones who make it ahead in life, are the strong. The perfect person that he saw was sort of this Superman. The person who doesn't need other people's help, who just uses their strength to climb the ladder and to get to the top. And you see this philosophy play out today, right? You see trying to climb that corporate ladder and sort of crush anybody you need to get to the top, to use people, to move forward in life. His philosophy followed from this idea that everyone's just trying to survive, right? This kind of evolutionary idea that everything's just trying for survival. And if all we're doing is trying to survive, then it becomes a very cutthroat world. And you sort of do whatever you got to do to get ahead. And if that means pushing this person aside or climbing over this person or backstabbing this person, if there's no God with any sort of purpose overseeing this, if it's just accident, and then it leads to just the strongest are the ones who survive. And so you should attempt to be the strongest. We're presented with this world that at heart doesn't seem to be fair. And I remember hearing this joke, which I think was real. I think this actually happened. I don't know if it's like a fake joke. I think this actually happened, but about a guy who was hiring for a position. And he had this stack of resumes. And he had some other people in there, and they were going to try it. I don't know if you've ever been in that position to hire somebody. You got this stack full of resumes, like, man, we got to go through this whole stack. And so what he did was he just took the top half of the stack off and threw it in the garbage. And he said, those people are unlucky. And we don't want unlucky people working for this company. We're just like, wow. And so, like, what if life is like that? Just kind of cutthroat, just not really fair. Random. You get dealt whatever your cards happen to be. And look out for number one. You know, we're naturally self-focused. It's funny, Sarah told me the other day about our oldest son sitting in our living room, and I promise you, he did not pick this up from me. Okay? So let me just lay it out there. I promise you, he has never heard me say this. But he heard it somewhere, or he expressed it somehow, and he's sitting there, he just goes, Mommy, go into the kitchen and get me a snack. And I'm just like, excuse me? Just jaw kind of drops like, we got to do some unteaching here. And it's funny because I don't think he's trying to be mean or malicious. It's just, you don't have to teach kids how to be selfish, right? We're like born that way. You have to teach kids how to not be that way. We sort of teach kids, no, this is how you share. They don't necessarily just start out that way. Oh, I just love to share. What can I do for you? Like, Mommy, what can I do for you today? Like, no, right? It's that's how we start. And we grow and we mature and we become less selfish. And so how does the Christian faith fit into all of this, right? Because that's one way to approach life. What can other people do for me? What can I get out of life? But there's another way to approach life. How does Christianity fit into this? It's fascinating that the Christian faith is responsible for an overwhelming amount of charity. And I don't have a full list here, but think of things like the Red Cross, Habitat for Humanity, Salvation Army. I mean, all these things are founded by people out of their Christian faith. You think of schools, orphanages, all those things, those were founded through the Christian faith, this idea of we need to help those who are in need. It's there. And so if you go back and say, like, how did these things start, right? Like, who started these things? What you find in almost all of these charities and nonprofits and all these things, you see Christians are the ones who, out of their faith, said, no, we need to do something for the other. And yet I think it comes out of a worldview shaped by the teachings of Jesus. So I want to show you on Mark chapter 10. Listen to the words of Jesus, but this is a fascinating situation because his disciples come up to him, right? He's got his followers, he's been teaching them, and listen to what they ask. These are two of his kind of inner circle. It says, and James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came up to him and said to him, Teacher, we want you to do something for us, whatever we ask of you. And he said to them, what do you want me to do for you? And they said to him, grant us to sit one at your right hand and one at your left in your glory. And Jesus said to them, you do not know what you are asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I drink, or be baptized with the baptism with which I'm baptized? And what he's talking about here is, when you talk about the cup, he's not just saying, like, I drank out of this cup, you drink out of this cup too. That's Old Testament terminology, often for God's wrath, and also for God's blessing, but often you hear about this cup being poured out as this idea of wrath. And Jesus is saying, are you able to face like what I'm about to face? Because he's making his way to the cross. He's saying, I'm about to experience some great hardship. Are you able to do that? And same thing with baptism. He's not talking about this what would later become this baptism ordinance in the church. When he's talking about, he's using baptism language to be submersed, talking about, are you able to go through this hardship, to have this cup, drink from this cup, to be baptized into what I'm about to face? And they say, yes, we are able. And Jesus said to them, the cup that I drink, you will drink. And with the baptism with which I am baptized, you will be baptized. James actually becomes the first of the disciples to die for his faith later on. So he said that you will go through that, but to sit at my right hand and my left hand are not mine to grant. These are positions of authority. So a king, you would have a king who would be sitting on his throne, and on his right hand would be like the top spot, and on his left hand would be like the second top spot. And so if you were to ask a king, they say, when you come into your glory, when you become king, can we have the two best spots in the house? Because that was this understanding at the time, was that this Jesus, this Messiah, was going to come into town, and he was going to beat up on the Roman Empire, and the Jewish people would be freed from the oppression of the Romans, and they would then rule over their oppressors. And they're saying, like, Jesus, when we get into Jerusalem and you do your thing and we take over all of this, can we sit with you and have those seats of power? And so Jesus is saying, you don't know what you're asking. They're getting it completely wrong. He says, it's not for me, but for those for whom it has been prepared. And when the 10 heard this, so when the other disciples hear that these guys are asking for special favors, it says they began to be indignant at James and John, and Jesus called them to him. So his people are fighting. He brings them all in. He's like, all right, guys, like let's talk about this. He says, you know that those who are considered rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them. He says, when you see people in power in culture, you see how they use their power. They lord it over people. They use their power to suppress people, they misuse this power. And then he goes on and says, but it shall not be so among you. But whoever would be great among you must be your servant, and whoever would be first among you must be slave of all. For even the Son of Man, that's another Old Testament term that he's using to refer to himself. He's saying, even me, God in the flesh, came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. Powerful, powerful stuff. We're presented with two drastically different ways to approach life. The first being, sorry, I didn't keep up with my slides there. Option one, what can others do for me? The disciples are looking for special status. If Jesus is going to become this king, then they want to be on that inner circle. This was a misunderstanding of what Jesus came to do. But they're actually identifying a problem that is really just true of humans in general, and has been true of many Christians as well. This idea that they're looking for what Jesus can do for them, rather than what Jesus can do in them. Does that make sense? They're saying, Jesus, we want you to give us these things. Not, Jesus, would you make us humble? Like, would you change us from the inside? Would you make us different kinds of people? They're saying, no, Jesus, we want power. We want position. Not, Jesus, would you change me? How often do we pray like that? And this convicted me this way. I'm like, how often do I pray like that? Jesus, I want this. Would you give me this? Can I have this? But not, Jesus, would you make me humble? would you make me great in your eyes? And if greatness in your eyes is to be a servant, would you give me opportunity to serve somebody this week? Would you help me to serve people this week? That's not usually how I pray. It's like, God, I need this. God, we need this. God, we're a new church. We need, here's the list of all the things we need. Rather than, God, would you change me? Would you not do something for me, but do something in me? Would you make me humble so that when you do give me things, I've got the character big enough to handle it? Right? Have you seen that in sports sometimes? Like you got maybe a teenager, and they're brand new in the NHL, and they get their first $1 million paycheck. Sometimes it goes pretty bad, right? They buy a sports car and they go and crash it in the second day. It's like, what happened? Well, they were given more power and more status than they had the character to handle. Right? All of a sudden, I got $1 million, I can do whatever I want. That's why you see oftentimes in pop culture, singers, the Justin Biebers and those folks who get a lot of money, a lot of fame early on, and go through a really rough stretch as they're like, I had all this stuff before I knew how to handle it. I think oftentimes we pray for God to give us the stuff instead of saying, God, what am I on the inside? Make sure I'm okay on the inside, or else this stuff will destroy me. He's saying, you guys don't know what you're asking. You are asking something that is actually quite foolish. We often ask, I think, for the same things. And what does it result in? Division, right? It divides the group. So these guys are traveling together. They're living together. I mean, they're tight. And all of a sudden, two of them break off and seek power. What does it do? It puts them against all the others. That's what happens, right? You see that all the time. As we seek power, as we seek more influence, all of a sudden it starts to divide people. Gaining more power rarely makes us better people, right? When somebody gives us more responsibility and more money and before we've earned it, it usually reveals the character we already have, right? It usually shows us what's on the inside once we get these things. And so he says, you don't know what it is that you're asking. And so what's option 2? Option 1, go through life. What can I get out of it? What can people give to me? Looking for what Jesus can do for them instead of in them. What can I do for others? Jesus turns them in the opposite direction. He says, actually, greatness is the opposite of what everybody else is telling you greatness is. He says greatness is to be a servant. And he actually chooses the lowest rung of the social ladder in his day. He says, you must be a slave. The slaves in that day they had nothing, right? They were as low as you could get on the social ladder. He says, if you want to be great in God's eyes, you have to be a servant. You have to be like a slave. And they're saying, what? That goes contrary to everything else we've heard. It says it shall not be this way with you. You're not going to fight over power. That's not what we're all about. We're about serving people. It's an example of what we looked at last week. Do I walk by the flesh, kind of my natural desires to self-preservation, or do I walk by the Spirit? I say, God, you guide me. You lead me what you want me to do. To seek a place of humility, not a place of honor. It's an attitude shift. It's not necessarily a position, right? That doesn't mean we say, if our boss wants to promote us, we're like, no, I want to be great in the kingdom of heaven, so I will turn down this promotion. It's not that. It's an attitude thing, right? And some of you maybe have heard of Chick-fil-A in the States. It was actually the most popular fast food restaurant in the States last year. It has been for a few years. It beat out McDonald's and everything else. Owned by a Christian family, the Cathys. They actually went to the church that we were on staff at. And I have a funny story about how I first met Truett Cathy, the founder, but I'm going to save that for another day. It was an embarrassing story, though. But his son, this is Truett in the middle, and that's his son Dan and his son Bubba. In the South, you meet people named Bubba. And Bubba Cathy and his wife Cindy, we rented our house from them. When Sarah and I first got married, we rented a house from them. And I remember one day I hear the lawnmower going. And I'm like, the lawnmower? I'm looking around I'm not mowing the lawn. Sarah's not mowing the lawn. What's going on? And I look out the window, and there's Bubba Cathy. One of the most successful, wealthy business people in the country. And he's out there in shorts and a t-shirt, and he's mowing our grass. Didn't tell us he was coming. Just came. Showed up, pulled his lawnmower out of his truck, and is mowing our grass. And had we not seen him and gone out there and thanked him, he would have just mowed the grass and left. And we would not have even known who did it. That's what this looks like. He's got position, but he's also got this attitude. Where he's saying that, no, even though I've got this high position in society, and I've got money, and I've got influence, and my business is the most popular and successful fast food franchise in the entire country, I'm going to get my lawnmower out, and I'm going to mow the grass for this newlywed couple who's renting our. I'm their landlord. I'm just going to mow their grass. And I'm not even going to tell them that I'm doing it. I'm just going to do it. Why? Because I desire to be like Jesus. And Jesus said, if you want to be great, be like me, who came not to be served, but to serve. That's what it looks like to just say, how can I bless somebody? How can I give to somebody else? Jesus focuses on the heart. So what does this look like for us? Jesus doesn't give us all the ways that we can serve. He doesn't say, and here's a list of things to do. Now, why doesn't he do that? I think this is fascinating. Because oftentimes, people are like, man, why doesn't the Bible tell me like the specifics of what to do for this, this, and this? And for one, I want to be like, well, like, how often do people complain already that the Bible's like full of rules? And then sometimes people want more into that. The same people who complain about the Bible being full of rules are like, well, why doesn't the Bible talk about this? And you're just like, I thought you already thought the Bible talked about too much. There's already too many rules in there. This is why I think is he's talking about the heart. Because what would happen if he gave us a list of like, here's 5 things that you should do to serve? We would do those 5 things and think we're good and do nothing else, right? That's what we do. That's legalism. That's what religion does. As you start to set, what are the things I have to do to be okay with God? And Jesus could say, okay, if you want to be a servant, you do like A, B, and C. Then all of a sudden we do A, B, and C, and we're like, I'm good. Me and God are in a good place. And instead he just says, no, serve. Just serve. He doesn't tell you all the ways that you can serve. He says, no, be a servant to all. That's an attitude. That's a heart saying, serve other people. We were in Galatians last week talking about walking by the Spirit. That's what this looks like. So this is the verse right before, kind of a little bit before the verses that we looked at last week. Getting into walking by the Spirit, he says, for you were called to freedom. He says, you don't have a list of things that you have to do. You were called to freedom, brothers. Only do not use your freedom for an opportunity for the flesh. He's saying, don't say, I'm free. Therefore, I can just walk through life trying to get people to serve me. He says, but through love, serve one another. He says, that's walking. And then he goes on to say, walking by the Spirit as God leads you is to serve one another. And so let me give you a couple examples. Now, this isn't like that list, right? Oh, here's the 3 things I do. Here's just as we brainstorm a little bit of like what might this look like in our context for us? How might we serve? Here's a couple examples. 1, serve each other in the church. So thankful for folks who got here early to help us set up, to be greeters, to do all these little things. Man, there's a million different ways that we can serve each other. What an amazing thing in these services to serve each other and in between services, right? We've been so encouraged by people. The West made all like knitted whatever the word is, all these things for our baby when we had a baby, and people brought over meals. I mean, like so many of you guys served us in amazing ways, and it was so amazing. Endless ways that we could serve each other. Just be creative and say, God, who has a need in the church, and how can I help meet that need? That's one way. Another way, serving others in the community, right? Saying, how can we bless the people of our community? One way we can do this is coming up this Saturday, Springfest, right? It's going to be our Easter gift to the community. No strings attached, no a free event. We just want to give to the community. Why? Because Jesus said that he came to serve, not to be served. And so we don't want to just say, what can our community do for us? We want to see what can we do for the community. If we believe in strengthening families, man, what a great thing to have families come together. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with, taking them to a community Easter egg hunt or whatever, but what a cool thing to get families together. The things that we're going to do at Springfest are not just come here, let me give you a bunch of candy, and then go home. It's come interact, play games together, bring your parents with you, and do this stuff together. Spend time as a family. Let's strengthen families. We believe in that. And so a gift to our community. You know what's interesting? Canvas Campus on the West Shore out in Colwood, Ashley, the pastor over there, has had people coming up to him every single Sunday this past year. And you know what they're saying? They're coming up and they're saying, you know what? You guys did a family fest that my family came to and had a great time. You did a soccer camp that my kids were a part of, and they loved it. You did a tennis camp, and just cheap cost of a tennis camp that our kids could go for a whole week, these half-day camps, and they loved it. You did this thing, and we came. And then next year, you did all of those things again, and we went to all of those things. He's had people coming up to him over and over and over again who show up at their church and say, you know what? For the last 5 years, me and my family and I, have been coming to all of these gifts that you've been giving us, and we realize whoever these people are, we need to go and check out what they're doing, because they've just given and given and given and haven't asked anything from us, and over and over again, families have been coming to the church on the West Shore, saying, we've been coming for 5 years to all your stuff, never stepped foot at one of your services, never stepped foot in your church. But we want to know, like who is this Jesus that compels you to live life that way? Because that's not normal. Like, people don't just give and give and give. There's always a catch. It's like, there's no catch. Jesus told us to serve. We love Jesus, want to be like Jesus, and if he came to serve, that means we want to serve. And not just serve each other. It's a servant to all. We want to serve our community. Here's a slight distinction. So you can serve others in the community. Here's another one. You can serve others through the community. Living in this community, it's not just church events, right? And so sometimes we can start thinking, okay, so sometimes our church does these things, but it's more than that, right? It's saying, no, I want to be a person who serves. And so that's wherever you go. And so there's been some cool ways that the community, we've already served at some things like the Oak Bay Tea Party we served at, and we served at the Christmas thing, and several things in the community. They're actually, this past week, I got bombarded with emails from Oak Bay leaders saying, like, would you guys come and help us at the Tea Party parade again? Because last year, like, we couldn't have done it without you. And you know what the sense I'm getting is that Oak Bay does a lot of great community things, but they don't necessarily have a deep well of volunteers. Because every time I've offered, and this is how I offer, I find out who's the leader of these things, I send them an email, like, hey, we're a new church in Oak Bay, we want to serve, give us the job that nobody else wants. like, we want to come and do what you need us to do. Like, no strings attached. We don't need to display signs, we don't need to tell people who we are, like, we just want to serve. And you know what they're saying? Like, please, would you come serve? Would you come and serve? And you know what else they're saying? And you know what? We want you to put out signs. We want you to give out stuff to people. Like we want you to, and we're like, we don't have to. Like, we're not doing that for the self-promotion. We're doing it to serve. And they're saying, I know, but we want you to do that. We want the community to know that you're here, because if you guys are all about serving, then, like, people need to know that you're here. We're like, well, it's not us, right? It's Jesus. Jesus has radically impacted our life. And because of that, it pushes us to do what is unnatural, to serve. Serving is not natural. Looking out for number one is natural. And so the reason we're doing Springfest this Saturday instead of Easter Saturday is because the community of Oak Bay does an Easter egg hunt next Saturday. And we're not trying to compete with that, right? I actually emailed them and said, how can we serve at your event? We purposefully are doing ours this weekend so that we can be free to help serve at yours next weekend. And they were just like, bring as many people as you can, show up an hour early, and we'll put you to work. Thank you so much. And I was like, great, we'll be there. So if you're looking for opportunities of putting feet to some of this, those are just some ideas as God might lead you. And so do you go through life asking, what can people do for me? Or do you walk through life saying, what can I do for them? Because one of the ways that we know we're walking in the Spirit is when we start to ask that second question. God, what can I do for others? Like, how can I serve others? Not what can I get out of it for myself? How can I give my life away? Because I want to be like Jesus. And he did that better than anybody else. If that's who my Lord is, if he has changed me from the inside, then I want my life to reflect him. God, how can I serve? And so let's pray together. And I'm going to invite Jake and Ingrid back up. They're going to close us in a song. But let me take a moment to pray. God, we thank you. We thank you that you did not look at us and just ask, what can these people do for me? God, you gave. The most famous verse in the Bible is that you so loved us, the world, that you gave. You gave your only son. You gave something costly, something important. And so, God, we thank you. We wouldn't be who we are if it weren't for the love and the grace that you have shown us. And so, God, we don't desire to serve people to try and earn that, because you've already given it to us. You've already taken the initiative, shown us your grace. And so, God, when we come to these verses, we don't desire to serve to somehow try to earn your love, to try and earn position with you. God, we don't want to approach you as James and John did and just say, Jesus, this is what I would like for you to do for me. Give me a place of power, of influence, of comfort. That's not what we need. We need you to radically change our lives, because we've all tried to be selfish, and it's not satisfying. God, there's never enough to make us happy as we keep trying to fill the hole with more and more things. God, because we weren't created to be selfish. And so selfish living will never make us happy. I think we've all seen that in one way or another. And so, God, we come to you with humility, and we ask that you would change us. God, would you change our hearts from the inside? We know our natural tendency is to try and be self-focused and self-seeking, self-serving. I know I'll do a whole lot for me. I'll sacrifice a lot for myself if I believe I can gain from it. God, it never is satisfying. And so I pray that you would give me a heart more like Jesus. That I would look at the world and not try to determine what I can get from it. God, that I would pour my life out. That I would serve people. That I would seek the best for others. That I would sacrifice not for my own gain, but so that my wife, my kids, this church, my family, my friends, strangers, God, would you create in me a heart that is naturally seeking to serve? Because I know when I serve others, we're really serving you. People created in your image who are precious in your sight. Jesus, you said, whatever you've done to the least of these, you've actually done for me. And so, God, we believe when we serve our community, we're really serving you. We're loving people who you love. And we pray that as we serve each other, as we serve our community, that people would look at us, but they would see you. They would say, this is not natural. And that we would be ready to say, you're absolutely right. We serve because of the one who first served and loved us. And we've never been the same. We've never gotten over it. And so out of response to that, the only natural response for one who has received grace is to give grace. One who has been served, to turn around and serve others. God, would you make each one of us that? Would you make us that as a church? Would that define who we are? That out of our love for you, we serve those whom you love and died for. We would pray in Jesus' name. Amen. These guys are going to lead us in one last song. And so as we close tonight, would you take these few moments, listen to the words of this song, but you may also want to pray and say, God, would you do whatever you got to do in my heart so that I will be a person who pours my life out for others, that they might come to see not a person who's great and does great things, but that I would be a mirror that reflects you. That when people see my actions, they realize that that's not natural, and so that I can point people to you. So you may take these moments to pray, and then we'll wrap up and close.
Lord, I come, I confess, bowing here, I find my rest, and without you, I fall apart. You're the one that guides my heart. And Lord, I need you. Oh, I need you. Every hour I need you. My one defense, my righteousness. Oh God, how I need you. Where sin runs deep, your grace is more. Where grace is found is where you are. And where you are, Lord, I am free. Holiness is Christ in me. And where you are, Lord, I am free. Holiness is Christ in me. And Lord, I need you. Oh, I need you. Every hour I need you. My one defense, my righteousness. Oh God, how I need you. So teach my soul to rise to you when temptation comes my way. When I cannot stand, I'll fall on you. Jesus, you're my hope and stay. So teach my soul. So teach my soul to rise to you when temptation comes my way. When I cannot stand, I'll fall on you. righteousness. Oh God, how I need you.
My one defense.
Oh, you're my one defense, my righteousness. Oh God, how I need you.
Thank you guys for being here tonight. I hope you're encouraged. I hope you're encouraged and challenged. And I just want to say, give a shout out to Grace and Ava and Jack and some of these young people who came early and helped set all this up. For Katie and Eris taking care of the kids. For Keanu and Emily taking care of the kids last week. And it really does my heart good to see young people who are saying, you know what, even though the whole world is telling me to be selfish, I know that Jesus wants me to serve. And they're living it. And I'm inspired by you guys. And so thank you for showing us what this is all about. Saying, you know what, I'm not just going through life trying to get what I can. I want to give. I want to serve. There's no age limit on that. Right? That's not something that we just move into as an adult. God can use the young generation of our world to show the rest of us what this looks like to follow after Jesus and live as he lived. And so I'm inspired by you guys, and I want to thank you for coming and helping us. If you're visiting here for the first time, we're anticipating over the months to come. There's going to be a lot of folks who are checking us out for the first time. We're a new church. As people start to realize that we're here, as we meet people, as we build relationships, as we do things like the Spring Fest, where it's just an excuse to bring all of our community and neighbors in so we can meet them. You can't have a relationship with someone you don't know, and so this is one way to just bring the community in, not just so they can play games, but so that we can meet them, so that we can build relationships with the people we live life with, introduce them to who Jesus is. And so we anticipate there being visitors like every week coming in. And so if you're a visitor for us tonight, it's your first time here, there's cards every other seat. If you wouldn't mind filling out your information on there, just so we can know a little bit about who you are. And then in just a moment, I've got a gift I want to give to you in exchange for that card, just to say, hey, if you leave here with nothing else, we hope you leave here with some good stuff, but if you leave here with nothing else, we want you to take a little gift from us to you. No strings attached, just, it's not a new car or anything, but you know, just a little something to say. It's a thought that counts, right? Just a little something to say, thanks for being here, and we want to send you with something. If you feel led, if you're a regular, if you feel God is leading you in this direction to give towards what we're doing, this money doesn't go to me. This money goes to do what we're doing. These service things that we do, these events, the services. If you feel led to, Jesus said, where your treasure is, that's where your heart is, and if God is moving your heart in that direction, then you can also use these. And there's some instructions on the back of how that looks, and then there's a little box in the back. You can pop that in there. Spring Fest that we were talking about, if you want to be a part of that, it's going to be so much fun. So 2 ways you can be a part of that. If you've got kids, bring your kids and let them just have a great time. Come and let them play the games and the bouncy houses and the crafts and the face paint. There's going to be a big cookie decorating thing, and they're going to get sugared up, so just warning you. But we want to love your kids. And so if you have kids, bring them. If you know people who have kids, tell them to come. It's free. It's just a free way to spend the afternoon, 2:30 to 4:30 on Saturday. If you don't have kids and you want to come and be part of it and help serve, there's some sign-up sheets on that back table of specifics of some of the places where we need help. Or if you're just like, hey, put me wherever you need somebody, just sign your name at the top there, and then we'll put you somewhere. It's going to be so much fun, guys. These things, when you're serving at these things, it's kind of exhausting, but man, it's so fulfilling to say, like, man, we loved our community. And so if you want to be a part of that, there's a bunch of people signing up for that. You can sign up for that. I'll let you know about this next week, but if you want to participate in the community's Easter egg hunt right behind Municipal Hall, right here on Oak Bay Avenue, I'll let you know more about that next, so there's not too many things floating around in your head, but that's going to be the next Saturday. And so if you want to volunteer for that, would love to have you come be a part of that as well. So why don't we stand together, and let me pray for us one more time. And I encourage you, introduce yourself to somebody you don't know. We're a new church, so like for the next few months and years, like a lot of people aren't going to know each other. We're getting to know each other, and so I got the privilege of knowing some of your stories. And man, there's amazing people in this room. So introduce yourself to one person that you don't recognize. You'll be glad to meet them because there's some amazing people in here. So let me pray for us. God, we thank you. Thank you for each person in this room. Would you empower us to live in a way that is not natural? God, we know that we cannot live like Jesus on our own power, but we also know that you don't call us to try and do that. And so we thank you for that. God, may your Holy Spirit equip us this week that we would serve people and bless people this week. And God, this week, starting tonight, would you give us an encounter with at least one person that we can serve? And God, would you use that opportunity to so blow that person away that they would ask, why did you do that? Why do you live this way? It doesn't seem natural or normal. And then God, would we speak truth and say it's only because of Jesus? God, will we see you do amazing things this week? Thank you for these people. Would you bless them this week? God, would you bring us back safely that we might worship you again next Sunday? We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you guys, and we'll see you next week. God bless you.